Welcome to the Rob Burgess Show. I'm, of course, your host, Rob Burgess. On this, our 225th episode, our guest is Senator Todd Young. Todd Young is the senior United States Senator from the state of Indiana. Thank you to Senator Young and his staff, especially Indiana Communications Director Jay Kenworthy, for taking the time and helping to set this up. And now on to the show. Thanks for taking the time today. I know that you're super busy, so I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. And I'd be with you by video if that's something you're looking for, but our video's down. So anyway, Good to hear your voice.
Nope, that's totally fine. Audio works for me. But yeah, I had a chance to talk to Governor Holcomb here last month, I guess it's February now, so 2 months ago. But and we talked about his trip to Taiwan, and I had mentioned the CHIPS Act as well. So I know you recently went to Taiwan as well. Is that right?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. Why was that important, and what did you find when you were there? And if you could explain a little bit for people that don't know about the CHIPS Act, because that was a bipartisan, pretty big piece of legislation that you had last year.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll start with the CHIPS Act, big picture, and then we can maybe dive into the Taiwan visit. But, the CHIPS and Science Act, which is its longer title, is designed to ensure that the U.S. leads the way when it comes to the research, development, and ultimately manufacturing of 21st century mission-critical technologies. Technologies like semiconductors, quantum computing, artificial intelligence, machine learning, synthetic biology. These are areas that will define, the 21st century's economy in so many ways, and we want to make sure that the U.S. is, on the cutting edge of R&D, and that our companies are able to, be the leading companies in these fields. But they also have direct applications towards national security. And so to the extent we're not, upping our game in terms of innovation and manufacturing these components like semiconductors or quantum computers, are able to write the AI algorithms, then we're not maximizing our ability to defend our values and our way of life. So the CHIPS and Science Act makes these critical investments in our people so that they can work in these fields and research in these fields, and then ultimately make things. Most immediately, we've seen that we need to make semiconductors and incentivize semiconductor manufacturing companies to locate on our soil. So the CHIPS and Science Act dedicated $52 billion towards incentivizing these companies to locate here. One might say, well, why don't you just let the market work? Why not let the market, lead to these companies locating on our soil? Well, the challenge is you have countries around the world that offer incentives that make it uneconomical for semiconductor manufacturing companies to locate here as compared to other places. And so we have to be in the game. We have to entice those companies to locate here. And then there's an interruption in supply chains on account of, global pandemic, as there has been over the last couple of years, or instead a war or other national security event, then, we'll have enough chips to keep our modern economy going, moving forward. So that's what we accomplished. Now, why is Taiwan important? Taiwan is adjacent to the Taiwan Straits. On the other side of the Taiwan Straits is communist China, and that is the most trafficked trade route in the world. So, all the goods that we like to ship out of the country and the many things we bring in will rely on open trade routes, the Taiwan Straits in particular, to send and receive those things. Also, Taiwan is ground zero for semiconductor production. Back in the 1980s, they made a strategic bet to invest in this industry and to subsidize production in this industry, and they lead the world in high-end chips. In fact, the United States doesn't make any of the really high-end chips used by our military, our weapon systems, our radars, our supercomputers depend on Taiwanese-made chips, and we need to build that capability back. And we're in the process of doing that. But in the meanwhile, we need to make sure that the CCP doesn't make a run on Taiwan, and that we work with the Taiwanese to keep their island country safe, because the global economy depends on it.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, I'm glad you mentioned artificial intelligence, because that was absolutely something I wanted to get to here. Have you played with that Chat GPT thing yet at all?
You know, I haven't played with it, but I've seen some of the term papers written, and I guess I have too much pride to admit that a machine might occasionally write better than me, but
well, sure.
there certainly is a temptation, at least when one is tired and not inclined to, go through the hard slog of writing, to sub it out to a machine when that writes it so well. So it's a little creepy, isn't it, Rob?
Mm-hmm. Indeed. Yeah. And I just see if artificial intelligence, as this progresses, disrupting several major sectors of our economy that haven't really been, affected by automation thus far. I feel like it's going to completely reshape our society. And I'm talking about this to you, not just because you're my senator, but because you're younger than about 90% of your Senate colleagues. So I feel like you might be able to get this here. But I feel like Congress is often trailing far behind technology in terms of oversight, and this is moving very fast. So is there any regulation that Congress can offer for AI technology and the fallout for, these white collar workers? And then my other thought is we're talking about China. I don't see them restraining themselves in a similar way, even if we do something regulatory here in the U.S., and they're just going to keep going forward, I imagine. So how do you, what are your thoughts about all that?
Well, I think your two reflections, and you'd probably concede this, are in tension. That's the difficult part, right? On one hand, we feel uncomfortable with the disruptions occurring in the economy, but on the other hand, we acknowledge that probably, the Chinese and other countries are going to move forward and embrace this, and we don't want them to lead. So I think the best we can do at this point is to try and regulate away some of the worst excesses of this technology, and those will have to be defined. We're still trying to get a sense of those, and you are correct. We always seem to be lagging the latest technological trends as much as we might try to keep up, even the younger ones. But at the same time, we want to make sure that there's a sandbox, a regulatory sandbox that allows our best minds, our creative minds, our innovators to seize this terrain and say, you know what, it might be a little uncomfortable, but we want to dominate this sector. We don't want the Chinese to, because in the end, we can channel our innovation in a way that's more consistent with our values, that doesn't bias against certain ethnicities or nationalities, like maybe the Chinese. Innovation would in this area, that isn't used for nefarious ends, and so I think we can do both of those things. It's going to take balance, going to take some wisdom, but for starters, there's a few things we know that in order to develop the best AI algorithms, you need to have some of the best trained minds in computer science. We have the ability to train those minds through our world-class universities. We have, you need motivated computer engineers. We have those, but you need computer chips. You actually need some of the best computer chips to crunch the algorithms at faster speeds, so that they can learn from more data sets at a faster rate. And so that our AI can produce, work products that are smarter than the Chinese or others. And this gets back to semiconductors. They're like the critical input for supercomputing, for AI, for machine learning, for so many other areas. And this is why many people are referring to computer chips as more important than oil these days. Oil is found many places around the world. It's a commodity. It's an essential input, but it doesn't take a lot of skill to, once you have figured out how to drill oil, to get it out of the earth, compared to developing the next generation computer chips. I mean, that really takes a lot of more value added expertise. And so we're in a situation where we actually have the talent, and we can build the ecosystem to be one of the leaders in this area. And that's our objective.
Mm-hmm. Right. I also read that you had or were going to meet with former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson here regarding, and you and a couple other colleagues there were going to meet regarding Ukraine funding. What's the feeling with you and your colleagues about keeping that funding for Ukraine going? Because to bring this back to Taiwan and China again, I think China is watching that very closely. And I almost feel like they're kind of seeing, is this going to succeed? I feel like they've kind of taken a little bit of a step back and saying, okay, well, let's see how this is going to go before we try anything with Taiwan. So I almost feel like by supporting Ukraine, we're also supporting by proxy Taiwan. Is that the way you see it?
Well, that's how the Taiwanese see it.
Right.
That is also how I see it.
Right.
The best thing we can do to deter Taiwan, or the Chinese from making a run on Taiwan, is to stand strong with the Ukrainians. And if standing strong means that we can, turn over many of the resourcing responsibilities and intelligence gathering responsibilities to our European allies so that we can focus more directly on the Asia Pacific, that's great. But it's essential now that we, along with the Ukrainians and our NATO allies, are in this fight. It's essential we win this fight. And make no mistake, I think there's a misperception among some that Xi Jinping and the Chinese communists have taken a step back from Russia, and their enthusiasm for this war has waned. I've just been briefed by some high-ranking officials at the National Security Council that, no, in fact, the Chinese continue to provide, extensive financial assistance, tech exports, military assistance, and so forth to the Russians. So they are joined at the hip. Mm-hmm. And this is one front in a much larger conflict between democratic, free and open societies on one hand and authoritarian, power-driven societies on the other.
Right. Absolutely. Now, switching gears here a little bit, when I had a chance to talk to you in July of last year, the Respect for Marriage Act was still in the House and it was poised to head to the Senate, and you said you were still deciding on how to vote. Yep. You ended up being one of 12 Republican senators to support that bill, which ended up passing. You really stuck your neck out on that, and even, Senator Braun voted no. You were censured by the Cass County Republican Party. But why was that vote important to you? Why did you ended up supporting it, and what reaction have you received overall?
Yeah, well, the reaction has been mixed, candidly. Mm-hmm. But I was quite, it was quite obvious to me that was going to be the case. This is a very challenging issue, and there was a lot of misinformation flying around when Respect for Marriage Act was being debated. There was some, fears, and I understood them from, many of my constituents, that religious schools tax status or religious non-for-profits tax status would be removed if they continued to pursue a mission consistent with their faith. Well, I mean, have you seen any reporting about the tax status of not-for-profits or religiously affiliated schools?
Not so much. I haven't.
I've seen none. And I made the arguments, which is, look, this has clearly been a culture war issue during my lifetime. This is a compromise. Right now, the current law dictated by the Supreme Court of the United States is that gay marriage is the law of the land. It's long been the law. And in the wake of that Supreme Court decision, there were a lot of Hoosiers that said, all right, we understand full faith and credit. If another state recognizes a marriage, the Constitution says that other states have to recognize it. They accepted that, but they didn't think it was right that a particular state, its own people, had to recognize a same-sex marriage. Well, I was able to get, along with my colleagues, language into this Respect for Marriage Act that I would argue advanced religious liberty. But if Supreme Court ever overturned its finding that gay marriage is the law of the land, state of Indiana would not have to recognize same-sex marriages, wouldn't have to sanction them under state law. So it was a compromise. Those who had concerns with the Supreme Court's decision had that to look at. Those who are concerned that the Supreme Court was going to overturn their marriages under current law, they were given something. They were given certainty that those would always be recognized. And this took away the issue. It would no longer be a subject of debates or conversations. In fact, it would put the issue firmly where the vast majority of Americans think it should be, which is to bed, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's where we are. I really appreciated all the feedback I got from Hoosiers. A lot of people said, "Oh, this is amazing. Our side won. The other side, no, it is horrible. Our side." I wouldn't say anyone got everything they wanted, but I would say the worst case scenarios, none have been realized. In fact, there's been no news. There's been no news about this. Mm-mm. So for those who subscribe to the mass email list that, frankly, are oftentimes designed to fundraise for their own organizations, mm-hmm. I'd ask them to rethink. I'd ask them to rethink whether they were sold a bill of goods. Mm-hmm. Because I think a lot of people were. Right. So I was there. There was a vote to disapprove of what I did. I had one vote throughout the state of Indiana. I represent 7 million people. If I have a dozen people who I love and respect who vocalize some opposition, and it happens to make Newsweek, I'm not too concerned about that.
And I had a chance also to talk to Governor Holcomb in 2021, and I had asked him about cannabis being listed. We talked about how we were surrounded by states that have either, Illinois and Michigan being recreational and Ohio being medical. And his point was that with it still being Schedule I drug federally, he didn't pick laws to uphold and ignore, is the way he put it. And also in October 2022, President Biden asked the DOJ and the HHS to investigate downgrading the federal status of cannabis. Would you be in support of that type of change? Because I think a lot of the states are kind of looking at the federal government to make some kind of move in that regard before they do anything, Indiana being one of them, of course.
Yeah, listen, Rob, this is not an unimportant issue, which is why you've asked about it. And I have constituents who do care about this issue. It's certainly not, as I look across all Hoosiers, it's not their first or even second order priority. I mean, they're concerned about China. They're concerned about taxes. They're concerned about the quality of their schools. They're concerned about, frankly, the stuff that I've chosen to spend a lot of time on. I don't think that this is something that Congress writ large is prepared to act on in the real short term. But in the meanwhile, I think we should be preparing for those debates by ensuring that we open up the floodgates for more research, more authoritative research. It's not politicized. And so for example, I've asked the Veterans Administration to do more research in this area as a debate around, our brave veterans and the glaucoma some of them have, and whether or not they should be able to smoke marijuana for medicinal purposes as that plays out. I'm especially open to discussing this within the context of pot as medicine, if in fact the evidence shows that under certain circumstances it can be an effective medicinal remedy to some problems. I'm less, inclined to embrace it for recreational purposes, just because that's not been a priority of my constituents. But I'll work with the governor and other state leaders as we kind of think through this and figure out what my constituents' priorities are.
Right, right. Now we're coming into the last few minutes here, and you've been a great sport, and I appreciate you again taking this whole time.
Sure.
I'm gonna ask you a question that I'm sure you're not going to tell me the answer to, but President Trump did just announce he was endorsing Jim Banks to take over Senator Braun's seat as he moves to try to run for governor next year. Do you have any thoughts about who you'd like to see run for your colleague there in the Senate from Indiana for next year?
Do you have any thoughts about what? Who I'd like to be running?
Who you'd like to be running, or who you'd support?
No, listen, I'm not going to volunteer any thoughts about that. I'll visit with anyone who decides to run. I've got a good relationship, for the record, with Jim Banks. I also have a good relationship with former Governor Daniels, who decided this wasn't the right job for him at this time in his life. And I have good relationships with others who have been mentioned as potentially being interested in running for this seat. But one thing that Hoosiers can be assured of is that whomever I'm serving with as U.S. Senator for Indiana, I will work hard to make sure that is a productive and constructive relationship, and there'll be a seamless transition between Senator Braun's departure and this person swearing in.
Right. What is there any other projects or kind of bills that you are really going to be pushing this term as we get going here? I know you just came back into Washington last week here, and you're getting started. But what are your main priorities?
Yeah, I mean, they're actually. I've always got tons of priorities here, informed by Hoosiers' needs, but research and development provisions in our tax code. I mean, we are a really manufacturing intensive state, and so we disproportionately depend on these sorts of incentives for innovation. Also big to our farmers and in agribusiness, our life sciences industry. So that's one provision. Non-compete agreements. It inhibits wage growth, entrepreneurship, and human freedom. To prevent people from leaving jobs because of employment contracts that prevent them from doing so and going to work for their competitors. So if we're going to have at-will employment in this country, which is where an employer can fire an employee for whatever reason, within limits that the employer wants, we ought to allow employees to go work for whomever they want or to start their own business. And so I'll be championing this along with my colleague, Senator Chris Murphy. Housing affordability is a major public policy issue, along with childcare, that I started working on several years ago, and under the belief that there was room for a Republican voice on these issues, with government increasing the costs of these goods and services unnecessarily. So I'll continue to work on those issues from a free market perspective. And there are plenty of other things, but I just wanted to give your listeners a sense that I came here to do work, not just to give speeches and appear on Fox News at night. And I will continue to work until the end of my service.
Great, great. Well, last question I always ask on my podcast is, what music have you been listening to lately?
Oh, that's a good question. So I've got pretty eclectic tastes, but before I go to bed at night, I've been listening to The Wall by Pink Floyd. Yeah, one of the best albums of all time. And for whatever reason, there's a lot of guitar music and what have you, but it's soothing to me. So I'll just kind of put that on late at night and gets me in the mood to sleep.
Good one.
Psychedelic dimension to Pink Floyd, I guess. And
absolutely.
Yeah. For those who haven't dusted it off in a decade or two, give it another try.
Absolutely. No, I that one song, Time, I loved so much. So good. I mean, the whole album's great, but
Yeah. Oh, it's amazing.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's the best-selling album of all time, so I'm sure people know about it.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, it's a great album. Good pick. Well, thank you again for taking all this time to talk, and I really appreciate it. You're welcome back anytime. So,
Thanks a bunch, Rob. Take care.
thanks. Bye-bye.